What's happening, everybody? Welcome to another edition of Talking Elite Fitness. Sean Woodland, Lauren Khalil, Tommy Marquez, all here with you as we barrel into the third and final week of semifinals. You two are both in Southern California and now back. How was that?
Oh, that was my first time in Carson. So it
Yeah.
was cool to see like all of the hype around the magic of the tennis stadium and just being there. It was probably more nostalgic for Tommy going back, but it was really cool.
Yeah, I'm not gonna lie. I drove down. I left the house at 4:15 a.m. on Thursday, and drove down and went to pick up Marcin, Heber, and Julian at the airport at LAX,
Mhm.
and then we went and did some cool stuff that I'll definitely talk about later. But then pulling into the StubHub Center the first time. I mean, Sean, you'll remember this. You know, we had that certain entrance that we had to come in around the side, and just pulling into like the Cal State Dominguez Hills, even the exit right there, and like the sequence of businesses and things around there was just a trip. It was like, I don't know, it was weird. It was like almost like going back into the house you grew up as a child, but someone else lives there. And then as we're like walking through the area to get some of the media briefing, it was like, oh boy, like this is different, and like
Yeah.
it was kind of a trip. And obviously there was a ton of nostalgia there. There was some stuff that we did that I did later in the week that was really fun, that brought that back too. But yeah, it was kind of weird, to be honest.
Yeah. It was funny. I thought Cole Sager was pretty funny when he was talking about there were trees here that they're now fully grown from when I first got here.
Yeah.
I thought that was pretty funny. But
Hilarious.
we're going to talk a little bit about West Coast Classic and Torian Pro that happened this past weekend, kind of react to everything that happened there. And then later in the show, we will preview the third and final week, most notably North America East, because that's the final semifinal that is going. That is a loaded field, especially on the women's side. And so there's a lot to talk about with that semifinal. But before we get into the show today, we want to thank our sponsor, and that is Garmin. If you are looking for the best smartwatch on the market, get yourself a Garmin. And here's a great thing. It is a one-time charge. There's no monthly fee. That data belongs to you. No subscription fee whatsoever. Buy the watch. You're going to get all kinds of great information. And what's cool about it is you can go as basic or as complicated as you want. They give you a training readiness score that's based on your sleep quality, your recovery, your training loads. You can determine, hey, it's a good day to train. Might be a good day to rest. You get a training status score. You get performance metrics, time that you're going to need probably to recover to where you're at a place where, hey, I'm ready to go hit it hard again. And they have HRV status. And Cole Sager, who is now an 11-time CrossFit Games athlete, really loves the heart rate variability.
About my Garmin is their HRV. Their HRV, the way that they measure HRV is really cool because they give an average of HRV over the night as opposed to just one snapshot throughout the night. And then they also give you a 4-week average, which allows people to see a trend on how their HRV is trending to make decisions on their training, their lifestyle factors, and things that they need to do to better recover.
So take it from Cole Sager right there.
Oh yeah, and
He knows what he's talking about.
I love the average, right? Because especially during a competition weekend like this past one, where your training kind of fluctuates, your sleep fluctuates, kind of cluing into where my HRV is, both from the training readiness score, but also the body battery score that they use. That also factors in a little bit more of how much energy you spent the day before. Actually, kind of helped me adjust some stuff here. So we worked Thursday, but then I set stairs and steps goals for each day that are a little bit higher than normal, knowing that would be the bulk of my exercise during the Friday, Saturday, Sunday. And it was actually pretty cool to kind of track that throughout the day, and also made me realize, like, running up and down the tennis stadium steps,
Oh, yeah.
I crushed. My daily goal was 20 sets of stairs, and I hit that by like 2 p.m. every day, and we still had like 2 events left. It was pretty cool though to kind of adjust my training accordingly like that.
Well, the model that we're wearing and that Garmin is recommending for CrossFit athletes is the Epix Pro. We all got ours on. It's fantastic. You can scan the QR code on your screen, go to Garmin.com, look for the Epix Pro. And again, one-time charge, no monthly fee, data belongs to you, and you can really get as detailed as you want with this stuff. I mean, there are all kinds of cool features that you can really dive into. I am still like learning, I think, probably the basics of mine, and I'm above novice level, I think, but there's a long way to go here. So it is really as involved as you want it to be. So Garmin.com, check out the Epix Pro, and get the best smartwatch on the market. Let's jump into this past week because we want to react to what happened before we look ahead to the final weekend. And there were two semifinals that took place. So we had Torian Pro down in Oceania, and then we had the West Coast Classic. And I want to start with the Torian Pro because we'll sort of end local here. And just in general, I thought the event, as always, had a great atmosphere. At least that translated well on television. I thought the coverage was fantastic. They streamed every heat of every event. Jeremy Austin, Pip Malone, and Bella Martin called everything. They had outdoor drone coverage on the runs. I think the guys who put that on that event do a phenomenal job, and it definitely it showed because it looked like a party down there. So full marks to the Torian Pro crew and the broadcast crew for putting that on. And there were some fantastic moments on the competition floor, battle between the top three men. You had the moment with Alethea Boone, the Carl Saunders team doing their thing. It was fun.
Yeah, I would say like the race that we were hoping for on the men's side definitely like showed out. I mean, between Bailey, Ricky, and Jay Crouch, at one point, all three of those men had led at different points throughout the weekend, and basically all three of them were going blow for blow, like a three-headed heavyweight fight. Each one had event wins. I mean, I think there were ultimately was just about a 75-point gap between those top three and the fourth place qualifier, Peter Ellis, and I don't think any one athlete won multiple events back to back. And I think that's telling of at least in a region where parity down the leaderboard isn't as high, but there was a really distilled strength of field at the top. That's kind of like the best case scenario in terms of seeing the competition fluctuate between them, actually generating some drama and actually setting up for what we hope to see from all three of these guys at the games. Because I mean, all three of these guys are going to come in with top 10 expectations on the men's side. And with how they performed and the way they played off of each other, it was really cool to see because there is some camaraderie amongst the Oceania men on that side. And then it also kind of begs the question, Peter Ellison fourth, like, what is he going to do? Because that fourth spot in Oceania, I think is one that's a lot of people are going to look at and be like, okay, can you prove to us that this is deserving, right? Because this is the spot that would have gone to either Europe or North America West. And with some big, with some big, well, it wouldn't have been Mertens. It would have been Tudor for West and Olivia Kerstetter and or someone else on the bubble for Europe or North America East, even if depending on how it shakes out. But, obviously don't want to take anything away from Peter Ellis in terms of like, hey, 4 spots are up for grabs. He went up and beat some guys like Luc de Jong, who've been competing there for quite some time. Peter Ellis is 22. I think a lot of people over there think he could be one of the next in line in terms of like a young athlete stepping up to the plate. So hopefully he can make some noise at the games and can maybe silence some of the doubters.
Yeah. Lauren, I know you were knee deep in West Coast Classic, so you probably didn't have a chance to watch any of the Oceania stuff.
I didn't, only some of the highlight things. And I saw that Julia Hannaford also held on for touch and go snatches on the final bar. We know that she is incredibly strong, but any athlete that can do that and that part of the workout, I think is just super impressive. We saw Colton Mertens do it at the West Coast Classic. We saw her do it at the Torian Pro. I think there might have been one other athlete at Torian Pro that held on the last barbell, but that is about the extent of the highlights I saw from Torian Pro.
No, I know how it is. You get in that bubble and you don't get to see a whole lot. But I thought
the blinders are on.
I thought it was a great event. I thought it looked great on television. I enjoyed watching it. Of course, there was a time like when you get around like 10 p.m. our time, that's when I'm starting to check out a little bit. So I didn't get to see a ton of it, but always fun listening to Jeremy. And it just seemed like a great atmosphere down there.
Definitely go check it out too, because there are essentially 2 races at hand. There was the one between Maddie Sturt and Gracie Walton at the top. Maddie obviously won the first 3 events, and it looked like she was just going to run away with it. But then Gracie slowly started to reel her in, and as we've seen in the past, like the last 3 events in this semifinals, like cluster of workouts can drastically shake up the leaderboard because of their format and because of what they're testing compared to the first 2 days. So I think it's a huge, like, one, Gracie Walton has showed up at every stage of the competition in a big way, seals the deal with the win. Huge congrats to her. Maddie Sturt, I think, now sets the record for the biggest gap between individual qualifications that was previously held by China Cho.
Mm.
She qualified in 2010,
Cool.
came up short 1 to 2 spots multiple years in a row before eventually qualifying in 2014. Maddie Sturt, now, I believe the last time was 2020. And now she had an extra season maybe going in. Actually, might be 2019 actually for Maddie, but I could be wrong. But either way, she either beats it or ties it. And I mean, good indication for her when China Cho did that. She came back and had her career year, one of the career years at the games, and really started firing on all cylinders in 2014 and 2015, and sparked a run where she was on Team USA and was inside the top 10. And so a lot of good things came after that. And then the secondary one was between Daisy McDonald and Georgia Pryor, where normally only one of those athletes would go. You got the extra spot. And Georgia Pryor was one of the athletes that I mentioned coming in that were like, hey, keep an eye on. Some people have been talking about her. I know we talked to Jeremy. She's 24 years old. She trains out of Snake CrossFit, which is where Jake Douglas is. And she could be someone that, we could be talking about for multiple years, even when, we start to see some of the big names step aside there.
Well, West Coast Classic obviously was the other one, and the big the big, I guess, headline, or how do I want to put this? The big subject, I guess, coming out of this is not necessarily who was there, but who wasn't. But I want to talk about who was, mainly the two people who won. And we'll start with Abby Domit, because when we were previewing this semifinal, her name did not come up. And because my storyline was Alex Gazan seems to be the favorite, but who else could there be? And it was Ariel Lowen. And I know we never mentioned Abby Domit. Mm-hmm. So the first question is, how did we miss Abby Domit? Because I think a lot of people may have missed her when it came to picking who was going to win this semifinal.
Yeah.
She was consistent.
Really consistent.
I mean, her worst finish was 2 9th place finishes, but through the weekend, a 4th, 6th, 5th, 9th, and then 3rd. Mm-hmm. I expected that she would have been maybe one of the final games tickets. So one of the last ones, women only took 8th. And I thought maybe she would be 8th or 7th, especially looking at the field and the other games veterans. But to have her first overall, I think that makes a pretty good statement for herself. Last year was her rookie year, correct?
Yeah, it was. And she and I spoke with her about that in the post game interview that's up on our Instagram now, and even a little bit afterwards. But last year was a little bit of a surprise. She was one of those bubble athletes that qualified in the final few spots, and it was really a scenario where she thought she could maybe snag a spot, so she sold out in her training for semifinals. And the total focus was just literally leaving it all on the table. And if there's anything left for games, then so be it. And so she even mentioned that, like, the games wasn't the best representation of her because of how she focused her season's training around semifinals. And now, having been there for a year, done a few big competitions, had a little bit of games experience. I think she was also on Lone Star's team too, but she felt like she was in much more control throughout the weekend, to where she didn't need to like sell her soul on every single workout just to make sure that she was qualifying. And I think in the long run, that was actually a better scenario for her, in that she could play the leaderboard game a little bit better instead of feeling that pressure to push every single time around. And where that pays dividends, especially in that final day, is when there are people fighting for your life and there are people that are maybe pressing the NOS button a little bit too soon. She cruised through the first 2 events and then really struck on that last one, where we saw athletes dropping left and right. She takes a top 3 finish, which is her best finish of the weekend. And this is kind of touching to the other winner, in a very Justin Medeiros fashion, stays steady and then finishes on a high note. And the end result is that she wins. and against, like, you look at the next two women on the leaderboard, and Alex Gazan and Ariel Lowen, who were the picks and who were top 5 finishes at the games last year. So I don't think it's a fluke, and I think it should get people excited about the prospects of what that could look like at the games this year.
Well, speaking of what things could look like at the games, one guy, we did talk about Justin Medeiros having a bounce back semifinal. Like, I thought he had a really good chance to win. I figured he'd be on the podium. But what impressed me the most about him, and why I think that he is going to be a factor at the games and may be in contention to win his third, is that you look how he won this one, and it is very much in line with how he won his 2 games championships. He, in his 2 games championship runs, 1 event win. I think that's the fewest of anybody who's won back-to-back championships. He had 1 event win, but he was extremely consistent. What did he do at this semifinal? Never finished lower than 8th, never finished better than 2nd. Consistency. Whereas last year, when we saw him at semifinals, he did not look like himself, and then he went on to have his 2 career worst finishes at the CrossFit Games. I think, and Lauren, you guys talked about this on Death By. Is Justin Medeiros back? I think he will be in the mix this year.
No doubt. I think, and it was apparent pretty early on. Saw him on check-in day on Thursday, just kind of catching up with him. He seemed to have that little underdog edge to him that we saw the first few years of his run. Like, obviously, he was trying to break through in 2020, makes it through to the final 5. And I think they had the edge of, like, I was just trying to break through after games qualification heartbreak the last couple of years. So he's had that chip on his shoulder. Comes back the next year, and the discourse is like, all right, who is? There was a little bit of discourse around whether or not those placings outside of Fraser were, like, totally legit, because of the alterations to the season. So that, I think that fueled him very much in a way to that first title. And then bouncing off of that, I think there were still some doubters around whether or not, he just caught a good year or not, because then we had Ricky and Roman coming back, and that fueled him even further. And he has the off year last year. Clearly, he didn't have a ton of things went wrong. But talking to him before, he was like, I feel like I'm the underdog again. And he had that almost kind of like, it's weird. Like in the movies, it would be like that little twitch in the corner where the crow's feet are, where you're like, oh man, this guy's got that, like, eye of the tiger again. And then you look at the results, and just as you said, Sean, that was the exact recipe that he held on for that got him his first title. Everything steady, best finish at the end, uncorked one, took second, won his heat in the final heat in a very big way to secure a win against really another strong men's field with Fikowski and Vellner and Quant and a lot of guys that had a ton of experience and know how to manage these weekends. And I to me, it makes me feel like this is the Justin that we want to see go toe to toe, that gives excitement to this first year in Fort Worth.
Yeah.
And not to mention the little goatee that he's got working that he decided to bring about. That's got to stay, man. That's got Texas written all over it. So,
he needs to just do the handlebar and shave the middle part. That's.
Oh no!
Oh man!
Oh no! No close up.
I don't know if it connects there, so it might be I don't know, it might be a floating handlebar, but
there you go.
Yeah.
Well, Lauren, calling the event, I mean, as I watched it, he never did anything, like, from a viewer standpoint. The few events that I was able to, like, watch in their entirety, I never saw him do anything flashy.
Sean, we barely talked about Justin, because when you're looking at, I mean, James Sprague had 2 home run hits. Patrick Vellner was doing really well until the snatch event and takes a 22nd. And then the cut line was really tough. Was it going to be Tudor? Was it going to be Colton? Noah ends up being Cole. So there are so many other big flashy storylines that were baked into the weekend that Justin was just doing Justin things. So sneaky, even on the box jump over workout with the legless rope climb. He was not in the conversation until there were maybe 2 or 3 rounds left, that all of a sudden he just made up all of this ground on the other athletes, goes to win that event. He won that event, right? Was it, or no, we took a third, but he was like, all of a sudden there were 5 athletes on the line and he just came up out of nowhere.
Yeah, I would be afraid of Justin Medeiros at this point, given what I saw from him for the semifinals. Only 6, I get it, only 6 events, and you're probably halfway through the games at that point, if even that. But he looked good. Another big topic of conversation was the bubble race that was
Yeah.
going on both sides. Like and we'll get to this in a second. It's a shame that the atmosphere at the West Coast Classic was not what it was at the Torian Pro, because I think the races and the battles going on certainly warranted that type of crowd.
Yeah, for sure. Especially with some of the just haymakers that got thrown on Sunday on both sides of the competition, between Cole and Tudor and Colton and Olivia and
Yeah.
Cole Greasehaber, I should say. Oh, I guess Cole Sager too, but Cole Sager was a little bit more consistent. But I just think some of those like heavy-handed swings that we saw for people going for it would have been just they were already epic in and of themselves, and what the crowd that was there responded in as you would expect, but it was still like, man, this thing should be packed out, and if it was, like, they would have heard it, you know, down on the beach 3 miles away type moments. But that's a whole nother story. That's really unfortunate.
I mean, even Scott Tetlow hitting not 1, but 2 PR snatches. The crowd that was there went wild, but it
Yeah.
probably didn't feel it because it was, I mean, not that many people. And I do wanna mention that the broadcast made it seem like there were less people there because all of the people or most of the people were at the finish line, so under all of those cameras. But still, there were some really big moments. Olivia Kerstetter has 2 event wins. Colton Mertens has 2 event wins. Neither of them qualified, so it's watching this cat and mouse of points going back and forth, but you don't have the crowd behind you for some of those big moments is just disappointing.
Colton
Yeah.
Mertens had the highlight of the semifinals, going touch and go at 265. Like, I'm sorry, that has been, to me, the most mind-blowing moment ever. Take that moment and put it in France.
Oh my god.
Oh, the city would have burned down.
It would have been insane. And look, like you said, the crowd there reacted accordingly. But
Yeah. The people that were there were hyped, but there just weren't enough hype of
Yeah,
people.
it
People
was
too hyped.
and even how that played out, right? The way that workout flows, I think that's the brilliance behind that particular test is that, there is the build both in excitement moving towards that heavy load physically with the barbell, and then the understanding that someone's going to have to execute 85 to 95% snatch under fatigue for a double, right? Knowing with people, you're going to have other people breathing down your neck. And you couldn't have picked 2 more different athletes in terms of just appearance in Brent Fikowski, who's 6'3", 220, and Colton Mertens. And I think seeing both of them succeed in that moment, and it's funny because James Sprague mentioned this in one of his interviews, how he wanted to show out for the excessively tall and the short athletes who are always told that there's like a sweet spot for CrossFit Games athletes. And I think Brent and Colton embody that perfectly. And they're the 2 ones out in front. And it was always like they were never outside of 1 to 2 reps within each other. And so you see the moment, all right, they load the final barbell, and who's going to take a chance here? And they're looking at each other. I'm sitting there at the finish line. Brent decides, hey, this is the point I'm going to push. I'm going to get that first rep in and buy myself some time over Colton. And Colton had that Uno reverse, like slap a draw 4 on you card. And it wasn't even a clean pull either. He
No,
rocked
it, do.
Yep.
And at that moment, I'm like, oh, he's definitely going to reset. He's going to put the bar down. And when he didn't, I almost got canceled because I almost said, are you effing serious?
Yeah,
And it was that
was
switch.
Everybody. I don't necessarily, I usually favorite thing to do on YouTube, hide chat, right? But I happen to have it on, and I've never seen comments roll in like that once he did. I mean, it was like just everybody like, holy this is like, emojis. It was awesome. That was the moment of the semifinals. Colton
That was
Mertens,
like the gangster glasses meme of the weekend. Like,
It was
Also, it like so many afterwards, so many people came back to the media pit and were like, "Gosh, damn it!" Like,
yeah,
because everyone was like, anyone who's taking photos
Oh
or video were
yeah.
like, "All
right.
right, Brent, all right, Colton," and he stands up the top one. You're like, "All right, get ready to pivot," and then you hear the
Mhm.
crowd
Yep.
go, "Look." To me, it reminded me of that scene in Jurassic Park when like the raptor hunter in the first one is hunting and he thinks he's got a line on
Yeah.
one and the other one comes from the side and he's just like, "Clever girl." And
Yeah.
like that's what it was. It was like Colton going for the second one. Everyone got caught transitioning over and you're like, "Damn it." That
Yep.
was sick though.
It was, and then Brent was laughing when he came across the finish line. He's like, "How am I going to compete with that?" Like, that was incredible.
Yeah.
You just
Uh,
throw your hands up, man, because
yeah.
he risked it to get the biscuit.
Well, let's talk about the attendance thing really fast. Lauren, you guys had a great discussion on it in Death by, so I don't want to necessarily rehash that. But this is not California in general. Bigger cities here are problematic when you hold events like this. This is not the first time. Go back to 2014 when we had the Invitational in San Jose at the SAP Center. They went, "Hey, we're going to go big. We're going to get it in a bigger venue." It just didn't quite work. They didn't have the attendance that they thought they would. Uh, and I think there are a lot of factors at play here. Memorial Day weekend, not the games. People,
High school graduation happening that weekend for a lot.
a lot
Yeah.
of stuff going on. And anybody who used to go attend the games in Carson knows that that event got lost. Again, until you were on site there at the now Dignity Health Center is what it is.
Yeah.
You didn't know what was going on. It just got lost. But it was a big deal for the CrossFit community because it was the championship.
Mm.
Yeah.
I think Loud and Live does a fantastic job of putting on events. Like, it's not their fault or anything like that, but
No.
it is like, it's hard to put that size of an event in a city like Los Angeles and expect a huge turnout.
I also think you have to couple into like look at the market and where it's at in its life cycle too. And California was where the sport and the methodology started. It was the earliest adopters. It was where the earliest enthusiasts were. And a lot of the gyms and people here, like I think the people that show up in crowds, the people that plan regionals, weekends, the parties, the outside of the games, because the games will sell out and they'll always have people going. Are the early adopter, like the early enthusiasts. And I mean that in terms that they're still early on in their CrossFit journey. We all know that feeling of when you first find something you're just totally into, right? You'll buy tickets, you'll go see them, you buy merch, you'll go, no questions asked. I'm gonna plan my weekends around that.
Mm-hmm.
And I think a lot of people in California, they've been doing it for 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 15 years that you don't see everyone. And they're just like, yeah, I've been there. A little bit more relaxed, but
well, I was just say there, and also there was no community event like there happened at some of these, right? There was no community. Was there?
there wasn't, and
There was
that's
no community event.
I mean, they did stuff in between heats. They did like community workouts, but you can't really run that there because that same weekend you had a LA Galaxy game on Saturday, you had a rugby match on Sunday, and the restrictions around that place are a little bit more tight because it is a professional sporting venue for multiple sports, and as is the case, there are multiple events going on Memorial Day weekend, and I think if you in Europe where the sport is growing rapidly, you have a lot more of those people who are getting their first taste of competition. They're passionate. They're the zealousness around the sport is like leads them to go to those events. And it sounds weird, but you got a lot of old. We were joking with a lot of people from Invictus, like a bunch of old dogs here that are just a little jaded and kind of like, yeah, we'll go, but and that's Invictus, who, to their credit, rented out basically an entire hotel for all their athletes and families and stuff, and they brought the biggest group out of anyone. So,
Them
yeah,
and Jamie Hagia.
yes, Jamie brought. Oh, she's the
Yeah,
best.
local.
She had like a whole section of fans in her shirts.
But
But again, they're from that area.
I liken these semifinal events to like the NFL versus like the UFL, whereas the NFL is in gigantic markets, right? That can support an NFL team. the UFL, which is now the XFL and the USFL merged. They're in like, San Antonio, Birmingham, smaller markets where it's maybe a little cheaper. You don't have to fill as many seats, but it seems like those, like someone commented on, I think on our YouTube video on Death by about, hey, Spokane's got a brand new facility. That would be like, that's the kind of place I think about for semifinals. And like even last year, it seems like they were, and I don't know, because the venue makes a difference, like how you lay it out. It seems like the one in Pasadena was better attended than the one this year in Carson.
Yeah, it's honestly hard to say, right? Because the
Right.
stands were so much more condensed in Pasadena,
Right.
and it was a convention center. So like you had 8 to 10 rows, and you had 4 to 5, maybe 6 grandstands there.
Yeah.
There were times, and this is where the attendance was definitely low, and it was low. It was highlighted further by the fact of the sheer size of the venue and capacity. Double with the fact, like what Lauren said, the angles of where the cameras were pointing. If you had just flipped the rig side and the end zone cameras, you would have looked and that the stands closest to the end zone, I would say about like 75% full probably during like the prime heats, and parts of the lower bowl area there were a little bit more full. So by no means was it packed. By no means was it great attendance, but there were more people than I think the optics and necessarily on the broadcast showed. But there's still a major issue with that. I would say it was probably about the same. That would be my guess.
Okay. Yeah. And again, the venue and how you construct it makes a huge difference.
Huge difference.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and I think that part of the conversation, when we're talking specifically about the CrossFit Games and getting butts in seats, we want it to be a destination for people. If they're taking off work and this is their maybe one of two or maybe the only family vacation that they're taking, you want it to be a place where, they can consume CrossFit, but if they stay an extra couple of days, they have options. When it comes to semifinals, though, I almost wonder if we do go to smaller markets where hotels are not going to be as expensive, flights aren't going to be as expensive, food's not going to be as expensive, and you will be able to fill the seats because the community can actually come out to support, where I think it was like $20 or $30 a day just to park, where that adds on to all of these extra things that if you go to a smaller hub, I even think of when I lived in Green Bay, Wisconsin, and there were 5 to 7 affiliates within just a 10-mile radius. And if they're like, oh my God, we never get CrossFit events here. I know it's only like 2.5 hours from Madison. So just an example, but I think you would get more local people to come and support because it's this spectacle. It's this thing that your city never gets. And when you don't have that many options for sporting events, that could be another highlight to draw more people to a semifinal.
You would also need CrossFit to promote that too. Like,
well, I think that has, it should be promoted regardless. I forget who said it, but having posters and affiliates of the season, what an easy, like low hanging fruit that every affiliate could just put up. If we went around and did a poll at my local affiliate, hey, how many people knew that semifinals were happening this weekend? Maybe 5% knew about it. And that's being generous.
Like, no question. And this is not to be like overly critical or anything like that, but it's just a statement of fact at this point that CrossFit has dropped the ball in promotion and promoting semifinal events, in promoting the season. It feels like they're like a half click behind in terms of timing.
Yeah.
Right. Like when they start promoting, when they actually start getting behind stuff and actually throwing resources at it, feels like they're treading water instead of actively swimming. And
at the beginning of the year, open, quarterfinals, semifinals, games, almost like a concert poster that every affiliate could have just up by the whiteboard. And just so they are aware of, hey, we know that we do the methodology here, but this is what's happening for the sport and why you should care.
And it's not just one post here or there. It's like the steady stream of like, let's continually they don't have the infrastructure for it right now, but it's still the job has to get done somehow.
Well, I think another, and this is, I don't want to go down a rabbit hole here, but I think another thing that hurts, especially like semifinals and stuff, is that the sport has been more or less removed from the affiliate. You look at I was just looking at the leaderboard here, the guys who qualified, I don't know how many of them are actually like involved in an affiliate. That they coach or take, like it used to be 10 years ago, where you had a lot more of that. So it was easier for a gym to sort of rally behind their athlete because their athlete was going to regionals or their athlete. So I don't think that's the factor. I think it is a factor though.
I wouldn't say it's, I don't think there's, and this fluctuates year to year. I think in general, where the status of a CrossFit Games athlete in relation to like training at an affiliate, working, as a coach, affiliate owner, isn't drastically different than it was in like 2018, 2019. And you could look at 2018 and be like, that's a high watermark for the sport. So I think where it comes down to is like, what is your messaging around these athletes and what they represent in relation to the affiliate and the methodology, right? So, and are you filling that void consistently with good messaging? So, I think naturally, as sports professionalize, there starts to be some distance between the everyday athletes and those at the highest level. That I think that's what comes within. That's what, if you want the sport, the level of the sport in terms of performance to go up, it demands in some ways. But yeah, I think it's an interesting, you have to look at what else has changed as well. I don't think it's just as simple as that.
Yeah. And like I said, it is a factor, not the factor. I think there's about 6 or 7 things at work here. But look, the positive thing is the games are in the United States, in Fort Worth, Texas, and they're more or less sold out. So it's not like there's no desire for it. I think there's just a desire level. Start talking about a qualifying event for the event that doesn't have as much juice as the games.
Well, we've spoken about it before that in the US, you have, not this year, but in past years, you had Rogue, you had Wadapalooza. Now you get a second Wadapalooza. You have 2 semifinals. You have the CrossFit Games, NorCal Classic. I mean, the options to see in-person events with the best athletes in the world, there's several options, and not everybody is going to go to all of these. And if the games are here, why wouldn't you choose that as your option? Because that's when the best of the best are going to be there. That's your Super Bowl. So you look at all of these other things. I'm curious on, I know that 2 years ago, Atlas Games was one of the North American semifinals.
East.
Were they, okay, they were the East. I'm curious what their numbers in attendance looked like and if it would be more profitable to have one semifinal in Canada.
Yeah. And you can't discount the fact that if the public discourse online is that CrossFit HQ keeps messing up, I think that ultimately trickles down to some people, whether or not they're like, hey, I can go to NorCal Classic where I have a buddy of mine competing, or I can go to a West Coast semifinal that's tied to HQ in some way or shape or form. That's an unfortunate reality of that, but I think it's not insignificant, that conversation happening in the minds of people in affiliate. But I mean, that being said, the bubble race was still fun. Kind of bring it back a little bit, and there are some like pretty interesting notes around the calls from people saying like, oh, Olivia and Cole both won 2 events, they should be going to the games. And I think you can start to draw comparisons. Now, granted, the distance of the first run between all the weeks is going to be different. So you essentially kind of have to throw out the run. Even just looking at the numbers of like how they would have finished week 1 in Europe in a very, densely contested event. I went and ran the number. I operated under the assumption that at least those athletes would be able to hold the position that they got, because the run on California was way harder than the run in Europe with the stairs and everything like that. But if that being said, and you also give California the advantage of an extra week of prep, and for nailing down execution and things like that, which matters in some of those day 3 events. I looked at Olivia would have finished 11th in Europe. Colton would have finished 13th, about 13th. And this is without factoring in how they're placing in those events displaced other athletes. So that could go up or down a few points here. But more importantly, Tudor, who was on actually the athlete on the cut line 1 spot down, would have finished 5th in Europe. Like Tudor Magna has a bigger claim to like, I should be at the games, in my opinion. And this is taking away nothing from Olivia and Colton, because they were both fantastic all weekend. And I think they'll certainly be back, but Tudor would have finished 5th in Europe. and put up some times that were much more competitive across the board from like an entire weekend standpoint. And it's tough. And I think it's tough too, because if you look at Colton, the margins of the events that he struggled in were really, really narrow. I mean, you
Yeah.
look at event 4, the handstand walk, he was
Oh my
23rd.
God, yeah.
He was 23rd, and only 12 seconds separated him in 23rd from Cole Sager in 12th. So literally every second that passes in that event, whether it's like, hey, my feet don't come out as clean on the row, or I take an extra breath before I kick up into my handstand, that's 3 points every second right there.
Yep.
The fit and it's not a 1-to-1, because obviously he was under tremendous pressure on that last event. You don't know how it would have played out under different circumstances. But obviously Colton really pushed to try and go unbroken on that last lunge, and failing that last lunge cost him 30 seconds at minimum. I mean, he officially got the full no rep at about 2:57 on the clock. If you assume that he gets that rep, stands it up, takes one more step, that's around 301, about 301, 301 and a half, based on what his cadence was for those. That's another 11 spots, 21 points just from that piece alone, which just highlights how much execution matters in these moments when you apply pressure to those athletes. Now, had he not done that and he had done that lunge unbroken, he still would have probably come up 2 points shy of qualifying. I think he would
Did
have
you read his post
No.
that he received a handful of no reps on the ring muscle ups as well?
Oh, okay,
Um,
because that's
Yeah, but we didn't see it on the broadcast because we were watching the races up top, and that goes back to the argument of people saying, that they want to be able to see everybody on the floor in like one
yeah,
box and whatever, because at this point nobody knows exactly what they looked like unless if there was a content creator that was specifically following him. But I
yeah.
think that's what added to the fatigue, with the grip fatigue too, right at the end of that lunge. And can you imagine if they programmed that lunge like even 10 feet shorter, it wouldn't have been as destructive as it was for so many of those athletes that
Good point.
were getting no rep on that final section.
Yeah, no, that's that makes a little bit more sense given how the muscle ups played out for him, and obviously
Mhm.
that's tough. I won't make any judgments on the no reps because I didn't see him, frankly, but he did take an extra break for the muscle ups. He broke them into 3 sets, and he came down with I think 2 or 3 reps left, which would make sense if he got a couple of no reps. In his mind, he's counting and thinking,
Mm.
"I'm done,"
Mhm.
and that's tough, especially in that one when your ears are just pinned back and you're seeing red the whole time. That's that's brutal, and that's what these fast and no holds barred type finales can be. But on the other side of it too, like Olivia Kerstetter, we published some of those interviews
Mhm.
with her, but she just speaking with her on Sunday, and this is after she had won the handstand walk. She knew the snatch event was coming up. Jacob joked, and I published that little clip too,
That's
that
funny.
if she didn't win it, that she would have to find a new gym. But jokingly, like they told me before that like, hey, she changed every single one of her weights and not getting the benefit of just walking to the second barbell after the first 3 weight changes, and she was right around like 4 minutes. So they think she can go sub 4 on game day, which gives you a win, obviously. But even in that moment, knowing that those 2 event wins would probably put you in line for a potential spot, and like the last event not being terrible for her, she was just like, look, I have a long career ahead of me. I know that I'm going to be okay. And like, if I don't qualify, it frees me up to work on some things
Yeah.
and prepare for that long run. If I do qualify, great. It's another year at the games of experience. She just seems so balanced about it.
She's got a good head
Um,
on shoulders.
yeah.
Yeah.
And
Good
I
support
think
group.
yeah, and just her team seemed at peace with surrendering the outcome and just going out there and putting her best foot forward and knowing that better days are ahead. So,
Right.
Mhm.
kudos to
Can
that.
we quickly talk about Hattie Canyo?
Oh, I
That's
I
a
Like,
definitely
we totally whiffed on.
yeah, absolutely.
holy
Yeah.
crap. I mean, she didn't need anything in that event 6. She had already clinched
Mhm.
to go to the CrossFit Games. She trains half of the year in Bali. What a fun fact about her. And she
That's
also
awesome.
used to be a firefighter that would go to rural areas in Canada to put out fires, which is another just fun fact. But
Mhm.
I mean, what a surprise on her.
Yeah.
She's not just nobody we talked about and nobody that we expected to go to the games, let alone she almost won her semifinal until the final event.
Yeah, it was
That was a
cruise
great story.
control. I mean, I even just go like she deserves a ton of credit. We had the interview with her where she talked about she was dedicated to her friend who passed away, and just kind of resetting the year for her in general because she was at near burnout last year. A few years ago, she was just a few spots from qualifying, made the last chance qualifier. She was right there,
Mhm.
and then as we see sometimes with these athletes, being on the precipice pushes you past the red line a little bit, right? Because you're like, rather than stay the course, I got to push a little bit more. And it pushes you sometimes into that burnout phase. But she reset and obviously had some perspective and dedicated the whole weekend to her friend. And it just seemed like she was out there for a bigger purpose. And the end result was, up through 4 events, it was her and Abigail Domit were the only athletes inside the top 10 every time. And even with the lower finish on the snatch event, she was in cruise control the whole time. And how do you
Yeah.
a lower finish on the final event? She was pretty much in cruise control. And I incredibly impressed by her composure out throughout the weekend when I talked to her, and seeing her team around them and how they were supporting her and how she just kind of seemed in the pocket as far as like that flow state for an athlete that's, you're about to qualify for your first CrossFit games. And it was just like, yep, I'm good. I'm chill. Her, Kyra Milligan too,
Yeah.
qualifying,
That was great.
fighting off on the bubble. Bethany Flores was great. Danny Spiegel deserves a ton of credit for fighting back after the first 2 days. I think there's a bigger discussion that we need to have now around like where do we jump to conclusions wise after the first day, after the second day, and then
Yeah.
knowing who the athlete is on the third day. But yeah, like it's Kyra has gotten a ton of experience the last year, and um, going to big competitions. And I spoke to her about when I met her 3 years ago at the Iron Games, and she was just like this athlete, like hoping to kind of maybe make individuals as keep going to semifinals or regionals, and now she's going to the games, and she linked up with underdogs and Kiefer and everything. All these good things have just started to come her way, so which is super cool. And um, I did have a note on the men's side about the mix of athletes that I thought was pretty interesting. One, Chris Ibarra deserves a ton of credit.
Yep. I was going to bring him up.
And you look,
Only rookie on the men's side to go to the games
but
from
you
West
look
Coast.
at the juxtaposition of the athletes there. You have Chris, James, Justin, and Cole Greasaber, all 25 years old or younger. And then you have Fikowski, Vellner, Sager, all over 33 years old. So you have 4 guys under 25, 3 guys over 33, and then you have someone in Sam Quant who first qualified 9 seasons ago. So this is really interesting mix.
Yeah.
And Brandon Luckett, who I think it was 2017 was the first year he qualified, and after being on the bubble the year prior, and it feels like he's just kind of like this vet who's just like, yeah, I don't know, maybe I'll do it, maybe I don't. And it's like, wow, what a weird like collection of qualifiers out of the West. And it's honestly, it's kind of cool to see like a lot of these like salty old dogs doing it, and then all these young guys that are really pushing them,
Yep.
and they're all going tit for tat for that. And sorry, I meant to throw this note in there when we were talking about Oceania. Maddie Sturt is 27. The other 3 qualifiers are all 24 or younger,
Wow.
23,
Dang.
22, and 24. So if you're looking at like, all right, next wave of talent in the sport, they're there, they're ready. So
Mhm. Okay, we're going to get to our preview here of North America East in just a second. Before we do that, we want to do our dog of the week, pairing up with
Yeah.
Barbells and Bullies. Moose. Moose is our dog of the week. He's 3 years old. He's a goofball, loves car rides. I mean, what dog doesn't really? He's a cuddle bug and a couch potato. Ha, P-I-T-A-T-O. Medium energy, loves some walks. He's snuggly, and he is house trained. He is currently in foster with at Blues Canine Rescue in New York State. He is snuggly, cuddly, goofy, and a handsome dude who is looking for his perfect forever home. Looking for a family who does not have any other pets or small kids, where he can lounge on the couch, go for a car ride, or perhaps a walk. They have a link, does Barbells for Bullies. If you want to put in an application to adopt Moose, and why wouldn't you? I mean, look at that dog. He's That's a good boy right
Cutie.
there. Yeah, just there he is on his bed.
Aw.
Watching this. Or you can contact Barbells for Bullies. If you're out of state, they do out-of-state adoptions. So as the dog days of summer approach, let's get these dogs some homes. Check out Barbells for Bullies. Follow them on Instagram. They do fantastic work. Check out @Blues Canine Rescue if you're interested in adopting moose and you live close to New York. And even if you don't, Barbells for Bullies does a lot of arranging of out-of-state adoptions and things like that. So let's get Moose a home. He looks like a great dog. So big thanks to Barbells for Bullies for pairing up with us and all the work they do. And we're happy to get the word out. Get these dogs some forever.